Hey, hey, Josh. Happy New Year to you and your family.
Happy New Year, Will. Appreciate you.
I wish nothing but peace and blessings for you all for this year.
Appreciate that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a question for you about Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. With Mason Rudolph being the starter now, what does that do for Kenny's psyche?
It's a question for him. I appreciate the call. It comes down to two things for me as far as how this affects Kenny Pickett. There's two ways you can look at it. You can either look at it as the opportunity for Kenny Pickett to get himself completely 100% healthy. That's how I would choose to look at it, because I think, honestly, and this is just me talking, you're in January, you're going into the last game of the season and potential playoff berth. If you're going to have a quarterback out on the field, you want one as healthy as possible. You want the best guy to give you the best chance to win. And I don't know a Kenny Pickett at less than 100% is capable of doing that. So that's the first thing I would look at. He gets the opportunity to rest and heal. The second thing is, and I know this has been a big point of controversy as to whether or not, he's willing to sit behind someone else. But at the same time, we've known Kenny Pickett to be nothing less than a team guy, dating back to his days at Pitt. I think we can all agree on that. If he is the team guy that we think he is, and we think it's the best interest of the team to have the guy out there that best suits their interest, it's kind of hard to imagine a guy like that who's been known as a team guy. That's been his reputation as a team first guy. If it's in the team's best interest, I imagine he would be curious and be sympathetic to the team's best interest. But if we're going off of what we've been told, that's what I would assume. Want to go to Tate in the North Shore. Tate, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Here to you.
Happy New Year.
All right. Hey, I'm impressed with the running game and being the quarterback being under center. I think that makes a difference. And what is amazing is that people were talking about Najee Harris, but they don't cherish 1,000-yard seasons like they did, because it's a 17-game schedule. But with the suspect line, he's to another 1,000-yard season, and he's a beast, man. He really is. I think he was injured during part of the year, which all running backs are going to be nicked up, But
he was last year. He had the Liz Frank injury in the first half of last year, and to his credit, last season, he never complained, never even acknowledged the fact that he was hurt or might not be 100%. And then we found out later on that he was wearing a kind of weird contraption in his shoe to try to keep everything together and keep from injuring himself further. He went through that and never complained and never said wise or otherwise, and still managed to do what he did last season. And to the point that Tate made here, the run blocking for this Steelers offensive line has not been consistent throughout the course of the year. There have been some times where Najee Harris gets a handoff in the backfield and he's met with a defender in his face. It happens a lot more often than this team is probably willing to admit. To his credit, Najee Harris is not the kind of guy who has that agility to avoid plays like that. However, Jaylen Warren does. This is what makes these two guys important, because now if you can't get the kind of results you need out of one running back given the circumstances, you still have the other one. I think this is really important. I've loved the concept of these two guys both being in the backfield since last season. I think there's a necessity for having that kind of duo, a thunder and lightning type duo, if you will, because now if you have two different guys that can run in different situations, now you can run in any situation, any kind of personnel group, and in any context. I think that's important for this run game. I think that's important for this offense. I'm glad you mentioned the quarterback being lined up under center, because one, that helps your run game. It gets your linemen in a three-point stance, which allows them to get low and get some leverage and maybe a better chance and some better space for your running backs. But also, it gives you the possibility of being able to use play action to your advantage. And Mason Rudolph did a good job of that yesterday, using play action, getting some space either down the field or in the middle of the field and being able to exploit that. I think both of those things are important where you're talking about playing under center. I think that's why it's so important to see what this offense is doing and to be able to have all of those facets clicking at the same time. You saw the run game clicking yesterday. You saw the passing game clicking yesterday. You saw the offensive line working as a cohesive unit yesterday, and they talked about it after the game. And both Dan Moore and Broderick Jones used those words that you like to hear when you're talking about offensive line play, imposing their will. When you see a unit doing that, an offensive line playing that way, you're going to have really great results. We've seen that a couple times before this season. So to see them get back to that on the road in a must-win game, it just warms my heart. I'm a guy who wants to see them run the football. I'm the one that's been making the case for a while now. Todd Haley walked out the door. Le'Veon Bell walked out the door. And the running game, for the most part, walked out with them. But now it has found a way back into the building, and it's reestablishing itself quite well. We got to take another break. We'll wrap up when we come back. Stick around. Top of the hour, it's KDKA News at 11. Let's send it over to Jessica Guay at the news desk. Good evening, Jessica.
Good evening, Josh. So tonight, a local community gathers to grieve a woman killed 2 years ago. Plus, police name a suspect in a suspicious death in Uniontown. And how high is the Powerball climbing? That's all ahead at 11.
Thank you, Jessica. In addition to everything Jessica talked about, we will talk more Steelers. We'll have highlights from Alabama and Michigan in the Rose Bowl, the semifinal for the college football playoff. We'll give you a score update on Washington and Texas as well. Couple questions here on Twitter before we close out. We got about maybe 3 minutes left in show. Sam on Twitter says, what teams do you see as interested in Mason Rudolph in the offseason, and will the Steelers make an enticing offer? That list of teams that would be interested in Mason Rudolph, it could be maybe in the double digits. If I'm thinking off the top of my head, Jets might be interested in, at the very least, a backup quarterback. Giants might be in the market for a quarterback. If I'm trying to think any further, Atlanta will definitely be in the market for a quarterback. I don't know if they're sold on Desmond Ridder. Chicago, you probably look at as a possibility. There's a lot of teams out there that can use help at the quarterback position. And I think this season is giving us that lesson as to who could use that help. By the way, Kirk Cousins, he'll be a free agent. Minnesota could be looking for a guy. And if you want a guy who has some experience that could step in and start, probably won't cost a lot, Mason Rudolph might be the option that some of these teams look for. But this is one of those things where I remind people, we've had this discussion about how many backup quarterbacks this season. There have been quite a few that have come in, played a couple really good games, looked well, and then by the third or fourth time around, they completely fall off the map and probably go back to the bench. So it's one of those things where I am very glad to see Mason Rudolph do well. I'm one of those people that thought that he was capable. I didn't think he was a jump off the page type guy, but he showed you what he's capable of, if for no other reason doing the small basic things that they need their quarterback to do in an offense that's actually being very efficient and has a good run game with him. I think that's important, and I thought he's done that quite well. Got another tweet here. This was an interesting one. I believe this is from, Joe on Twitter, who says, this one's for the old folks, but Mason Rudolph reminds him of Craig Morton. Underrated, comes off the bench, and does great things. Bear in mind, this is a reference that predates me, but I'm going to test my own knowledge here. I want to say Super Bowl V was the game that he was probably, that helped a team win the Super Bowl with, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm going to say he was at Dallas way back in the early 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But that's actually a pretty good comparison. There are some teams who have had reliable backup quarterbacks in past years. Frank Reich is the one that comes to mind for me. That's more in my wheelhouse as far as guys that I remember. I still remember when Craig Reich came in a playoff game and brought Buffalo back. I think it was, a 30-point deficit or 28-point deficit, brought them back to win a playoff game against Houston. That's what comes to mind for me. But solid depth. Super Bowl VI, our producer, Hannah Mears, lets me know. I was off by just one. I was close. But it does remind you that really good backup quarterback play, not only is it hard to find, but when you find it, it's better than gold. It's valuable because you never know when you can have another guy step in and make some things happen for you. Jeff Hostetler is a guy that comes to mind. West Virginia fans are probably yelling at their TV thinking about backup quarterbacks, and he's one that won a Super Bowl with the Giants. But that's where you get into the value of a guy like Mason Rudolph and what he could mean to the Steelers or to any other team when we get to the postseason. We are out of time. Thanks, you guys, for watching. Thanks for your calls. Thanks for your tweets. It's you guys that make this show great. For our producer, Hannah Mears, and our team here at KDKA, I'm Josh Taylor saying thanks again for watching. We're here for you 7 nights a week on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. See you later.